Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Young, and I am a professional astrologer, and I'm going to be doing a cosmic weather report for the upcoming month of May. Definitely can say that it's quite a volatile time right now, certainly in the world of economics and global trade. And I'm actually going to take some time to do more than just my normal review. I'm actually going to look at the chart of the United States, the one that's considered the sort of de facto chart that we use in astrology, but also take a look at the chart of China, which I got a date and time and location for the new conception of China, the Republic of China, from one of my clients who is from China. And so I'm going to use that chart to talk a little bit about what I see going on astrologically. There's certainly an ongoing slew of information coming out about what's happening with the world economy, but I want to talk about it from the perspective of astrology after I go over the upcoming month of energy that we've got to deal with. When I do these reports, I look at essentially three things which are related to how astrology operates. The first is the question of ingress, which is when points move from one sign into another. So, what points are changing signs this month? Talk a little bit about points that have already changed signs, or at least predominantly last month it was Neptune going into Aries, which was quite significant. And also, we're going to have a number of transitions where Aries energy is going to get ramped up during this particular month. And I think under the state of volatility that we're facing, it's going to be pretty dramatic in a lot of ways. So there's the ingress, which is a point going out of one sign into another sign. There's also retrogrades, which actually won't be talking a whole lot about retrogrades this particular month because, for the most part, the points are direct. So there isn't a ton of retrograde energy happening at this time. And then the transits, what's going on in terms of the outer points, really not all the outer points, but starting with Mars and going all the way out to Pluto, how are those points interacting? And then I want to take a little bit of time in this particular video to talk about the chart of the United States and the chart of China and actually show you the visuals of what's going on and why I think that what we're looking at is in many ways, probably going to be a lessening of American power and an increase in China's power, which I think will be shaken out through what's going on with the trade behavior, the tariffs, and how countries are responding and what's shaping up. But this is going to be looked at through the lens of astrology and why I think that it is a continuing effect of the transformation the United States is going to be going through, where its power is going to be decreasing rather than increasing. And a lot of it is because the major transits that actually created the power for the United States are all happening again. They've come back around. They're coalescing together at the same time. But I think the outcomes are going to be somewhat different just because of the nature of the way the world is set up. And what we really can, I think can easily be argued is we're not in a World War III that is the traditional sense of a land war or troops being moved to take over territories. I think we're in a modern World War III, which is an economic war, and it is affecting the global community. It is a worldwide war and battle that's being waged right now. So to begin with, the ingresses, I start with the sun. The sun in the month of May will actually transition out of Taurus and into Gemini on the 20th of May. So right now, the sun is definitely focused on an energy around Taurus's values, which are our daily lives, how we maintain our wealth, how we take care of ourselves physically, what we value, traditions. These are all things that are forefront in Taurus. When we go to Gemini, when the energy shifts to Gemini, it is going to be about communication and about learning and about knowledge and a focus on information, actually. I think what we'll see this month is the impact that the tariffs are having, that will be the repercussive impact from the fact that ships are not coming from China to the United States. And where I've been looking for information, I don't really enjoy looking at any of the mainstream news. I tend to prefer now kind of trying to find options on YouTube that are specific to certain uh, independent kind of journalism. In other words, not looking at Fox, not looking at MSNBC or any of the mainstream outlets, but specifically, there are a number of really good videos on the shipping industry by people in the shipping industry. Freight Times is one that I found. There was another one that was really interesting, talking about the fact that right now the ports are empty. And what's going to happen in terms of the impact on daily goods that we get in the stores is going to be quite similar to what we saw during COVID. The Gemini energy that's going to be coming in with the sun is going to be sort of the widespread seeing of this information. And a number of different things pop up. And I like to follow the news from an astrological lens, like what's going on in an astrological way that would be interesting to me as a reflection of the energy. What would definitely be an interesting look at something that just came out today, as a matter of fact, is that Amazon at the moment is intending to show the cost increase for goods based on what they have to pay in terms of tariffs, so that there's a clear understanding that the tariffs are going to be a cost absorbed by the consumer. They're paid for by the companies in the United States, but they'll pass that cost on to the consumer. And so the consumer will be paying more for goods that are being shipped in from everywhere in the world, but especially China will be the most dramatic. And even if the tariffs were, for whatever reason, just completely eliminated, if the answer tomorrow was, "Oh my goodness, we made a mistake," just kidding, no tariffs, the shift that's occurring astrologically is already underway. In other words, it's kind of like you've opened up something and you can't put it back in the box, even if you want to. And that's what I'm going to show you when I look at the chart of the United States and the chart of China. Now, the other ingresses, Mercury will actually ingress twice in May. On May 10th, it will go into Taurus. It'll actually move out of Aries because it starts out in Aries, but on the 10th, it will go into Taurus. It will spend 3 weeks in Taurus, which will again, there'll be a thought around our sense of safety, our sense of security. And again, the thing that I always like to try to explain about astrology for those of you who are maybe coming to it new or are interested in it in an understanding of kind of how it works is that the astrology works with the choices that are being made both individually and collectively. So, for example, the idea of thinking about what matters to us in terms of our security and our safety will be impacted by what's going on in the world around us. So this particular, every time around this, every time around the same time in the year, with a little bit of advance or a little bit of pullback, Mercury is going to go through Taurus. It spends 88 days in a sign, so it passes through all the signs in a yearly basis. So we think about it this way quite often. And so being in Taurus now, under the conditions that we're in, that's definitely going to be a mindset of how are your investments doing if you have them? How are you doing if you have a job? Are you in one of the industries that could be widely impacted? And it's going to be a wide impact. It's not going to just be the ports that will be, cutting back. It will also be the trucking industry, which is already showing signs of difficulty. Once again, one of the great things about YouTube is you can go find people in the trucking industry that will talk about what's going on from the standpoint of the people that are actually doing the work. Again, another article that just came across my feed is that UPS is laying off a large number of people. That will probably increase because the volume of trafficking goods is going to basically fall off a cliff. Now, that got started in the past month, but we're not going to see the repercussions of it until this month when the reorders don't actually show up. In other words, there will be a lag between what actually was ordered and what actually doesn't show up. That's going to start showing up this particular month. So the next thing that will happen is Mercury will move out of Taurus and into Gemini. So I think what we're going to see this month is just, a need to understand what's actually going on and people trying to get information as much as they can about what's actually transpiring and what are they going to be seeing, what are you going to be seeing, any of us are going to be seeing on our day-to-day life level, which Gemini actually rules the third house and it deals with our day-to-day interactions. And so I think what's going to occur is some of the effects of the choices that have been made that are really disrupting global trade in a profound way will begin to actually be not just conversation, but will be actual results. And that's going to be some of the Taurian energy. But then it's going to be a question of what does it mean? What do we need to understand about what's happening? Now, Venus begins in Aries, and it actually will spend the entire month in Aries. So the point that deals with relating and connecting, one of the things that I think is part and parcel of what's going on astrologically for the United States is a real awareness that is being forced upon people that the systems are not going to be stable. They're being destabilized. They were in trouble before it began, but now there's this sort of sense of really, how are we going to take care of ourselves if we don't have any of these tools that we kind of rely on or expect are going to be available to us. Certainly one being Social Security, another one being 401ks, the stock market. If you're at that level and you can invest in that, or just really, what have you been doing in terms of your debt versus savings experience? This is another interesting statistic that certainly can be researched, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can do the research as well. But what you'll find is that the savings rate in the United States is less than 10% for individuals, and in China it's 40%. So the idea of being forced into a scenario in which you may have to pull on savings until the economic situation is readjusted, certainly China is in a better position in that regard. Not saying that China doesn't have its own number of economic problems and that this trade war isn't having a very profound impact on the manufacturing industry there. But the idea being that if you're going to sort of recognize which position has more strength, the idea that the United States has a certain type of strength is a carryover from years ago, as opposed to what is being seen now. And so, again, trying to get information is to find out how bound up are the economies, and China is making agreements. What's interesting is while the United States is choosing a position of attacking and aggressively presenting itself as being cheated upon, China is out right now making new arrangements. Actually, they've been making arrangements for the last 10 years from the first Trump administration. How this works astrologically is, again, a show of shifting energy, which is predicated on actually Pluto having come through and had a return for the United States, but generally having passed through for the world. The last time was 247 years ago, which was when the United States was actually brought into its inception. That was the Revolutionary War. And it was a revolutionary period of time. So we're in another revolutionary period of time. Generally, the revolution, when you're the larger, more powerful entity, the revolution is downward. And if you're an up and coming entity, the revolution is going to potentially bring you up and force you up. So there's a little bit of British colonies versus the British crown kind of mirror effect here in terms of what's going on with the superpower that's trying to dictate things, just as the King of England at the time was trying to dictate things, and the other power is deciding, no, we're not going to actually roll over this particular time. We're going to choose a position in which we're going to see if we can actually move on without this relationship. And of course, that will weaken the power of the larger, more powerful individual or country at this particular time. Now, Mars also is going to begin the month in a fire sign in Leo. It's going to spend the entire time in Leo. So there's just not going to be any time and into the volatility. And not only that, but a lot of angry rhetoric is going to be kind of part of this as well. But it's definitely going to be a situation in which the feeling of safety being eroded and the need for answers and the need to in some ways feel like it's a fight or flight scenario, that is going to be some of the energy of this upcoming month. Saturn is actually going to do an ingress, which every 2.5 years it changes signs. So it's going to move from Pisces into Aries on May the 24th. So what we're going to see again is really a ramping up of this fire energy. We're going to end up with Venus in Aries for the entire month. Mars will be in Leo. You'll have Saturn going into Aries. Mercury will start out in Aries, go to Taurus, all the way through to Gemini. The Sun will go from Taurus into Gemini. So these will be the ingresses for this particular month. And as I said, with retrogrades, there are no retrogrades. From Mercury to Pluto in April, everything's direct. So here's the thing. Again, I want to try to explain about how the astrology works. Direct does not mean good. Direct means the energy is flowing. So if the energy is destructive, it will flow even more effectively in a destructive way. If the energy is constructive, the energy will flow in a constructive way. So it depends on how the energy is moving, what direction it's moving in. And this month will be an amplification of whatever that move is. That's why I'm saying it's a bit of a problem to say that even if there was a decision to change course completely, to do a full U-turn, to turn all the way around and go, we're going back to the original tariffs, or maybe even we're going to go to no tariffs, whatever would sort of implicate that. There's no changing that energy when these directs, what's going on with the direct energy is already in play. Now, current positions, I usually like to review this kind of quickly. I go over this in each of the videos that I do. So Jupiter is currently in Gemini. It will be there until June the 10th. So once again, there is just this expansion energy that is really having to do with new beliefs and changing beliefs. Jupiter expands belief, changes belief when it's in Gemini. And so we're going to see again a new way of thinking, new information that is going to question old paradigms. And so the idea that the sort of relationship that people think exists or people's what they think they understand about global economy, that's going to be changing as well as impacts from things like AI. So there's a lot of energy that reflects this Jupiter and Gemini uh, that's going to be still in play for this entire month. As I said, Saturn will transition out of Pisces and into Aries, and that's going to be about self-sufficiency. And in a way, it's interesting that that is kind of the argument that's being made is that we want the United States to be more self-sufficient in terms of how the administration is presenting its position. But there is going to be probably a need for more self-sufficiency. It's just probably going to come at the cost of what do you do when you don't have these other programs helping out and you really have to rely on yourself to take care of yourself? How does that work out? Where are you? How have you positioned? And what might you need to do in terms of leveraging relationships with other people during a time where there could be quite a number of people that become unemployed and the unemployment system being unable to compensate them for whatever reason. And suddenly it's a question of, well, where do you go if you are unemployed and unable to get unemployment or unable to get it easily because again, these are our government programs to try to help people transition. But this energy, this Aries energy, and it's also amplified by the fact that Chiron has been in Aries since 2018, 19, and it also was a Chiron return for the United States recently. In fact, it's still very much in play, but this whole idea of this isolationism, this sort of leaving people to fend for themselves, all of that energy can be seen astrologically, and then how it plays out is based on the choices that are being made, certainly at a national level and at an economic level. And so the question for all of us is, how do we weather that? That's what I'm, hoping to share with you is the weather is it's a pretty bad storm right now. And we have Uranus still in Taurus. It's going to be there until April of 2025, April of 2026. And this is, of course, the last time that it was in Taurus was 1934 to 1942, so Great Depression, World War II. This was also the period of time when Social Security was created, so it's not surprising that Social Security and these social programs would be under attack during the transit that was one that created the base program, which was the Social Security program. So again, from an astrology standpoint, this is not very surprising. The way it's going to play out, of course, can be very harsh, very profound in the same way it was when it was previously in the sign 84 years ago. That's for sure. Neptune, it has just moved into Aries. Now, the last time it was in Pisces and the last time it went into Aries was the Civil War. So definitely a battle of ideologies, and we're seeing that writ large in terms of what's going on with the government, which has, you know, it was traditionally set up to have three different branches that would interact as balancings of power, but that is once again being disrupted and in a way that I think is meant to sort of shake the United States into a new understanding of how it's going to be part of the world and not be a leader in the world potentially. And again, like I said, when I get to the charts, I'll show you why I think that's the direction that things are headed for the United States. And that does mean, what does that mean for those of us that live in the country and the privileges that we have had for, well, since World War II for the most part, but even more so since you had the United States go off the gold standard and created a fiat currency, and the currency became the global currency. It became the currency that backs all other currencies, which is now even more fragile because of the decisions that have been made in terms of how to deal with the wider community. The dollar could potentially lose its dominance. And something that's been kind of in play, but it would fit again with these transits of Uranus and Taurus, Neptune and Pisces going into Aries, and then Pluto leaving Capricorn and going into Aquarius, which means that it's an upheaval in civilization, which again, I think we're seeing that very clearly. And it's going to be a transition process. And what it usually means is that something new is going to emerge. So the old system that had the United States as the dominant world power, that's the one that's breaking down. Other powers are going to rise up. Will there be another singular power? Will it be China, or will it be a more egalitarian mix? We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But I think we can acknowledge that this will be sort of an end of empire kind of storyline that I think we're going to be looking at. So, in terms of the major interactions, there really aren't very many in May, which means to me that a lot of what's going to be going on is just going to be pushing forward what got started in April, which was really the volatile period in terms of transits and what was going on. April was definitely a red hot month, no doubt about it. So, at the beginning of the month, there's going to be a sextile, which is a flowing energy between Neptune and Aries and Pluto and Aquarius that actually started back in April on the 20th and is actually going to run all the way until October the 22nd. So again, it's the idea that things are rolling downhill, and if you're not liking where they're going, it's a little bit late to try to stop that and even to push things back up the hill. So while these energies are positive in the sense that it is about moving energy forward, if the energy is headed towards a downfall or headed towards some sort of negative direction, it just will move more fluidly in that direction. Not only that, but in that first week, Jupiter in Gemini will also form a complementary or sextile relationship with Chiron in Aries. And that's going to start on May the 2nd and go to May 27th. Now, Neptune in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius, these are the outer points. These are big issues that are going to be in play. And a lot of it's going to be a rearranging of society. Aquarius is about society. Pluto is doing transformative upheaval work. Neptune in Aries means that now things are going to start really showing up. That's why I think this will be the month we will start to see fewer things in the shelves. That will be an Aries Neptune, like the ideology led to an outcome, and now the outcome is actually going to be measurable. It's going to be seen because Pisces is kind of like, oh, it's just floating around. It's dreamy. It's delusional. It's the imagination. Aries is nope. Now we're going to get direct results. Jupiter in Gemini and a complement with Chiron and Aries. Again, it's going to be this question of how well positioned are people, you that may be listening to this, people that you know, how well positioned is anyone in terms of maybe having to wait and see what the fallout is, which could take months to a year to sort of shake down to whatever the final reality is. And keep in mind that this is not, while the results will look COVID-like in terms of what may happen in the retail stores and access to goods, it will look like COVID. But the difference is that was a worldwide event and it was something that was affecting everyone. But actually, the danger in other parts of the country, because goods are not coming to the United States, is a potential flooding of goods into other areas in order for the Chinese manufacturers and the Chinese to sort of recoup some of the losses that they're going to be taking by not delivering goods to the United States. But that means that we're not talking about a disruption of the supply chain on a worldwide basis where nobody is getting anything in because of the fear or concern around a disease. This is going to be a case where it is going to be an isolation, and it is going to most likely be the United States that will face that isolation while China is working its way into forming new relationships. And so there will be plenty of, if you dig around, again, this is why I think it's important to look at independent sources. If you dig around, you will find that China is in conversation with everyone but the United States. They are in conversation with Europe. They are making deals with Saudi Arabia. They are most likely having conversations, certainly with Canada. They're also having conversations, absolutely having conversations with Brazil, who is going to be providing them with their soybeans because they've been putting the infrastructure in going back 12 years. They started putting infrastructure to get soybeans from Brazil, so they pulled that trigger. They're getting beef from Australia. This is going to be a very different circumstance if you look around and go, and it's really interesting. I was watching a few videos, and it was fascinating to see all these photographs of Xi shaking hands with all the dignitaries from around the world, and not seeing any of those photographs with regard to the United States president. So, shifting politics, shifting dynamics. When we get to the middle of May, these two transits are pretty much it. From May 8th to May 15th is a continuation of these two transits. May 16th to the 23rd, same continuation of transits. It's only at the very end on May the 24th when Saturn will actually conjunct with Neptune. They will merge together. So to me, what that's going to be, and that's going to be in play from May 24th to September the 1st. And I think that's when we're really going to get a chance to see what the new reality is going to begin to really become. Because the idea of it historically was that when Neptune went into Aries, specifically within the United States and related to the Civil War, that was the period in which it was kind of clear who was going to win that war. Even though the war did go on for a couple of more years, the shifting energy was this is where the new reality is going to take place. And I think we're going to see a similar thing. So again, nothing new under the sun, repeating cycles. What do the cycles look like? The thing that's particularly intense is that you've got the transit for the Great Depression and World War II, along with the transit that was the Civil War, along with the transit that was the Revolutionary War. So the United States is getting absolutely tuned up. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to switch over and actually show you why I'm talking about this potentially being a decline in the United States and a rise in China. And certainly, it's really interesting to look at the charts of countries. They do have birth charts that can be referred to. And as astrologers, they really do prove to be quite interesting to take a look at. So, what I want to do is I want to be able to show you what this looks like in terms of, and again, there's a lot of different transits that are going on, but there's one transit in particular that really does stand out for the countries, and that's what Pluto's doing. So, as I said, Pluto recently passed over the United States Pluto. So, I'm going to show you that by doing a little bit of drawing here while I'm talking. And this is where Pluto was in the natal chart for the United States. And it's in the second house, which deals with finances. And Pluto is currently now at the very beginning of Aquarius. But here's the key issue. This upside down horseshoe is the south node, and it represents karma, and it represents karma that is problematic. This is the karma that has to be cleared up or has to be resolved in some particular way. Now, Pluto is going to go retrograde in the next month, and not in May, but in fairly soon. Actually, it may be going retrograded in part of this month. I'll have to go back and take a look at that. But anyway, what's going to happen for sure is that another year, 2 years out, Pluto is going to move over the south node, and that's going to be, I think, truly significant because it's going to crack open anything in terms of the past life or the karma of the United States that's not healthy, that deals with Aquarian energy, which deals with the society, that it's going to be pretty dynamic. It's not the only thing that's happening, but I just wanted to point out from an astrological standpoint that energy of Pluto being after its Plutonic return and working its way to the south node, this is not an uplifting alignment for the United States chart. This is upheaval that is going to be probably felt through difficulty, felt through real struggle. Now, in a similar vein, when I go and I take a look at the Chinese chart, and what's interesting is the Chinese chart has an ascendant with this particular time, which was October 1st, 1941, at 3 p.m. in Beijing, China. This Pluto energy is moving right over the ascendant. It's just passed over the ascendant. It's going to go back and pass over it again. So this is an upheaval of identity. And once again, what is China doing in terms of its identity that is upheaving? And it's not to say that China is not without its problem. I mean, if you do a little bit of research, you will find out they have created entire ghost cities where they've built things and there's nobody actually living there. They do have their own internal problems. It isn't as if there is any country on the planet that doesn't have potentially significant internal problems right now, based on decisions that have been made in the last 75 years. But what it does represent is that it is a new version, a new vision of China that has the potential to be coming forward. And if that's being worked on by China, then they will have a chance to embrace that and grow into that. And so that's part of the energy. There are a couple of other things even more significant is that it will be around the same time a Pluto opposition that is going to happen. Now, keep in mind that a Pluto opposition happens every 247 years. So we're talking about Pluto getting ready to oppose itself, and there Pluto is in Leo, and so interestingly enough, and just a really kind of an odd side connection, but this is also the generation that's the baby boomer generation. They were born with Pluto and Leo in the United States, so there's an interesting connectivity there that could probably be worth exploring in and of its own right. The other thing that is, I think, profound is Uranus is moving over Saturn in the Chinese chart. So a lot more dynamic activity, not that the United States doesn't have it, but the idea being here, this is a period of time in which there is a breakthrough. So Uranian energy is a breakthrough, Saturn is about, and so if we think about Saturn being in Taurus, it's like a certain traditionalism that is consistent, absolutely fits with the attitude that China seems to exhibit, which is, very much a methodical, thoughtful, slow process of doing things. Uranus is bringing in some energy of radical transformation. So here again, this is kind of in terms of if something's coming down and these energies are complementary, it will accelerate the downward energy. If something is coming up, it will help push that energy up more quickly and more successfully. Not only that, but we have a Jupiter return that is actually lined up perfectly on the day of this reading. So again, thinking about Xi going out and making these connections, having these conversations, talking to other world leaders, coming up with other trade deals, all of this is happening. All of this is what's transpiring right now. So this Jupiterian return is a beneficial energy. So this is what I'm sort of looking at in terms of, well, what's really kind of going on here. And I do think we are talking about a pretty intense dynamic in which, based on what's showing up, China has the opportunity to definitely move up, and the United States definitely has the opportunity to just stumble. And it seems that it is kind of stumbling in a way on purpose based on how leadership is approaching things. So just to clarify for myself, while I've got you all here, I'm going to do a quick look at animating one of these charts and just confirm for myself. I do believe Pluto, I may have needed to mention that Pluto is going to go retrograde this particular month. So one of the cool things about this program is I can actually make it, yep. So it's going retrograde. I needed to mention that it was going to go, actually, as a matter of fact, it may be going retrograde on which day here? Yeah, it's going to be retrograde on May the 5th. So that means it's going to be working its way backward. This is just going to be really an interesting time. But what I'm telling people that are willing to find me and listen to me and work with me on a one-on-one basis is definitely to be thinking that if you are in the United States and you're looking at the world economy, that it is a time to be thinking very frugally, to be thinking about, what you need, and hopefully you position yourself well to deal with an economic downturn. Recession is certainly the word they've been trying to avoid. But I think in terms of the energy that shows up, especially with what's going on with Pluto for the United States, and again, it's happening in the third house, which is day-to-day life. It's going to be something that's going to be there's going to be a lot of upheaval in everybody's day-to-day life that's coming along. So with that in mind, I am going to say my goodbyes at this point. And again, I hope the information, while sobering and difficult, I mean, it's sobering for me when I look at it, does actually prove to be helpful. I'd rather people to have a sense that the choices do make a difference. I mean, human free will is part of it, but also how those energies interact with the stars or with the astrology, with the planets, the points in the sky. That's going to be they're going to go in a particular way. And right now, this is that time of significant upheaval because of Pluto being in Aquarius. It is a time in which the entire civilization experiences an upheaval. So please share this video with anyone that you think would find it useful. I hope you found it useful. If for any reason you want to know how your astrology is working with the current times, certainly feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to work with you and have an opportunity to help you in any way that I can. Until the next month, have a great day.